What's up and welcome to the channel. In this episode we're going to be getting this Ferrari painted and reassembled. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and like and share this video. Let's get to work. Alright, so the Ferrari parts are in the paint booth. They've been blocked with some 180 grit sandpaper, and then we 320'd on a DA to get rid of the 180 grit scratches. They've been wiped down twice, they've been taped up. All that's left to do now is to get them tacked off and start spraying some sealer on. So let's get suited up, get some sealer mixed up, and start spraying some sealer. Alright, so we got our paint suit on, we've got our sealer mixed up. Now we changed out our sealer because I ran out of the ECS 65, and we're trying a new sealer now. It's the same PPG EnviroBase chromatic sealer, but it's the ECS 85 series. And it uses the same hardener, it just has a different mixing ratio. So it mixes 4 parts of the sealer to 1 part of the hardener and then 1 part of the reducer. As opposed to the ECS 65, it mixes 3 1-to-1. So, got the sealer mixed up in the gun. Let's go put some sealer on these parts. Alright, so the sealer's been flashing off for about 15 minutes. We've got our PPG's EnviroBase already mixed up in the gun. Let's go put some base coat on these parts and make them red. Alright, so now we're ready to start mixing up our clear coat. We're going to be putting on PPG's DC 3000, and the hardener we're going to be using is the DCH 3095. Now this stuff mixes up 4-to-1, which means 4 parts clear coat and 1 part hardener. Alright, so we've got the waterborne base coat all sprayed on there. We used the blowers and the fan to get everything flashed off. So now we got to spray some clear. I've got the clear mixed up in the gun, so let's go make this stuff shiny. Alright, so I got the last coat of clear sprayed on there. It looks really good. Let's go have a look at it before I clean out my clear gun. Make sure I don't need to put another coat on. Alright, so I think those parts turned out really good. I'm going to get my clear gun cleaned out, I'm going to get this paint suit off, and I'm going to head to the house. We'll let these parts dry overnight, and when we come back in the morning, we'll get them untaped and get them out of the booth. That way we can load the car up and get it taped up so we can get it painted. Alright, so let's get these parts untaped and get them unloaded. That way we can get the car put in there. Alright, so we've got the Ferrari in the booth. It's all taped up, everything is sanded. We've already wiped it down one time. We sprayed some etch primer on this bare aluminum here. And we are ready to start spraying. So let's go mix up some sealer and get this thing painted. Let's get suited up and get some sealer sprayed on this Ferrari. Alright, sealer's mixed up, paint suit is on. Time to start painting. Alright, so the sealer's sprayed on there, and while we're waiting on it to flash off, let's go ahead and mix up our base coat. Alright, so we've got our base coat mixed up, we've got it in the gun, it's ready to spray. The sealer's been flashing off for about 15 minutes, so let's go make this Ferrari red. Alright, so we've got our waterborne base coat sprayed on there. We used our fan and our handheld blower to get it flashed off. We're ready to start spraying some clear. We've got our clear mixed up in the gun, so let's go make this Ferrari shiny. Alright, so I got my last coat of clear sprayed on there. I think it looks pretty slick. Let's go look at this thing really close up. That way we can make sure we don't need to put another coat on it before I clean out my clear gun. Alright, so it looked pretty good to me. I don't think we need to put another coat of clear on this thing, so I'm going to clean out my clear gun, get this paint suit off, and head to the house. We'll let this car dry overnight. We'll come back in the morning, get it all untaped, and then we can start putting it all back together. So, we'll see you in the morning. Alright, so it's the next morning. Let's get this Ferrari untaped and get it out of the booth. Alright, so we are waiting on a radiator to get here for this Ferrari. So in the meantime, we can go ahead and put this door back on the car and go ahead and reassemble the door and also put the front bumper together. Alright, so we've got us a radiator for our Ferrari. So let's get this old radiator out and get this new one put in. Alright, so we've got the new radiator put in. We vacuumed down the coolant system and topped it off with distilled water. So now we can start putting together this front end. Alright, so we've got the bumper on, we've got the headlight in, got the belly pan on. So now we can start working on some of these splash shields and some of these inner liners. We can also start putting in some of these cooling ducts. Alright, so we've got our rocker panel on, we've got all of our splash shields in, our belly pans on, front bumper, headlight. We've even got our brake ducts all put in and zip tied up. Everything looks good. So now let's set our hood on here and start riveting on our latches. Alright, so these hood pin latches have seen better days. They're in rough shape, and I can't in good conscience put these on this Ferrari. So I've ordered some new ones. They should be here tomorrow, but while we're waiting on those to get here, let's go ahead and put this splitter on. Alright, so we've got this front splitter bolted on. Got these new uprights put in. You can see here the old uprights were kind of bent up pretty bad. You see this one, we tried to straighten it out, but it's kind of tough to make these things straight, so we went ahead and just bought some new threaded rod and put on. Now these are wrapped in, looks like shrink wrap. And I was going to put that on these, or just paint them black, but after seeing them on there silver, I kind of like the way they look like that, so I think we're just going to leave them. Now we can get it off these pedestals and get it away from the lift so we can start cleaning it up. Alright, so we've got our new hood pin latches. Let's get these things installed. Alright, so we've got this thing all put back together. Now let's fire it up and see what this thing sounds like. I think the dash is supposed to come on.
Yeah, that battery dead as fried chicken.
So I guess we need to put a charger on this thing. Alright, so we hooked our battery tender up to this battery to give it a charge, and shortly after plugging it up, the green light came on, which tells me that this battery's not low. So we must have another issue. For some reason, I'm not getting power to the ignition. And I'm thinking maybe it might be this switch here, or it might be this main breaker switch right here. So I'm going to break out the test light and start checking some of these switches. I'll probably start with the main power switch, and then if it works, I'll move to the ignition switch on the dash. Alright, so we had a couple bolts back here, some Allen heads, and a couple in the front, and I had to take the radio loose. So I should be able to lift this off and gain access to the bottom of this thing so I can check that switch. Alright, so we've got power to one side of the switch and none to the other. I'm going to switch it to the on position and see if I've got power to the other side now. Okay, so I do not have power to both sides of this main switch, even with the switch turned on. So that tells me that this switch is bad. So let's order a new main power switch for this thing. Now, there are two switches that could be bad in this, and the main power switch is one, and then there's the small ignition switch up on the dash. But the main power switch is the first one in line from the battery to the car, and I feel pretty confident that there's not two bad switches in this thing. The chances of that are probably pretty slim. So I'm thinking the main power switch, once we put in, we can be able to turn it on after it's wired up, which will give 12 volts to the ignition switch. And once we flip that on, it should light up our dash, and we can get this thing fired up. UPS just dropped off our new switch. Let's get this thing put in the Ferrari and see if we can get this thing to start up. All right, so I've got this new switch put in. Let's turn this thing on and see if we got power. Yes, that is a good sign. So I guess we can fire this thing up. I don't see any warning lights on. Let's give it a try. Power's on, switch is on. Let's hit the ignition switch. Here we go. Power. Contact. awesome sound. Let's let this thing warm up to temperature. Make sure all the water, all the levels are good, and then we can give this thing a bath and get it delivered.
You know, Dove chocolate sure does taste a whole lot better than their soap does.
Alright, so that's going to be about it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel and this is the first time you're ever seeing me, consider subscribing and click on the bell icon. That way you won't miss any future content. If you have any thoughts or questions about the video, leave it in the comment section down below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. See ya!